Well, hello and welcome back to the online broadcast blueprint. I'm Jeremy, and we started this yesterday, Eric, and the deal is you got to be named Eric for me to interview you. I think that's so we started yesterday with my friend Eric, and now I've got another friend Eric who's joining me. And don't worry, Eric, I want you to do all the talking, but I want to set this up a little bit.
Okay.
So I was doing the math.
Oh.
Eric and I met in February of 1989.
Wow. I would not have been able to do that anniversary day.
February of 89. And so backstory, I got my first radio job in 1986 at a station in Southwest Oklahoma called KRLG, 98 FM. Yeah. And I did that for like a year or so. And then I left, came back in 89. And during this time, Eric had come to work at KRLG. And when I came back, Eric, you were the afternoon guy. And I only worked there part-time for a little while. And then I wound up going to Magic, you remember? So then we were on competing stations for a while. And then I later came back and worked, and Eric was my boss. He was the program director. And we did that for a year or two. And then I moved to Spokane in the early 80s and worked in radio there. But Eric, over 40 years, Eric has worked in radio. Yeah. And unlike me, who got out of it in the mid 90s, Eric was in it for the long haul. And just recently, over the last couple of years, has kind of moved out of the full-time radio thing and is doing some other exciting things. I wanted to have Eric on because he's recently started his own online radio station.
Yeah, with your help. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. But what I'm interested is, number one, catch us up, Eric, on tell us about what got you into radio. Give us your history. What got you? Why'd you leave radio? Why are you coming? You know what? The whole story. So I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you bring it on home.
Ramble at the mouth, you know.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
Radio guys too. Yeah. As long as we're not ORPs, and you know what that is obnoxious radio people, you know.
Yes, so. I haven't heard that for a long time. Obnoxious radio people.
Yeah, and there are a bunch of those. They're phasing out though. I mean, with how radio has changed. Okay, so you're having to go way back in the memory banks. Yep. This is a unique way of kind of starting. I was from a small community in Iron River, Michigan, about a 3,000 populated community. They had a weekly newspaper, and they had a radio station that went on at 6 a.m. in the morning and would close down like at 11 o'clock at night. You know, it wouldn't even go to midnight. You know, they would shut down. And I remember we now conclude a broadcast day, you know, and they played the national anthem. Yep. And as soon as the national anthem was off, you know, because you had to go actually turn the radio station off, you just flip it off, and that would just then you'd hear that. Yeah. You know, that's what you'd hear. I mean, you say, wow, you're that old? I mean, I feel like Marconi here, you know, like you'd have to warm up the tubes to get the radio on. Okay, so let's just start with there. So that's the radio station. And it was 1984 that I was a sophomore in high school. Mm-hmm. And I loved radio. And I grew up with loving the sounds of radio, you know, like really sports broadcasting at night when the AM sticks would go down in your area, and you could really get Chicago, you could get New York, and you could get Detroit. And I was a Tigers fan. And so you could listen to these play-by-play guys doing baseball. And, you know, so that's really kind of got me started in the interest of wanting to be a communicator, you know, and how do you do it? I mean, you're just in high school. Then I come to find out that the local radio station hired local kids to be part-time board ops, you know, for, you know, different things. And you'd have a radio show on Friday and Saturday night. You could, because that was unique, because this radio station was a radio station for everybody, because they had in the morning is called telephone time. And that was that local trade show thing that was like for 3 hours. And they would have country. At that time, they were country during the day. I kid you not. They had the dinner date hour at 6 o'clock.
Nice.
That was the transition, but it wasn't nice music. It was Lawrence Welk music. It was the dinner hour was elevator music for 1 hour.
Nice.
And that was transitioning from small little community in Upper Michigan. And it was for everybody. I mean, you had the ag report, in the noon, you had the obituary report. I had to do that. I've got nightmare stories on that. So you had to do that, and so that's what the makeup of the station. Then after the dinner date hour, they went to top 40 radio at 7 o'clock. So a kid like me saying, wow. So I didn't know they hired local kids. I thought you had to go to school. And so I went in there and got a tour, and the evening guy was really nice. We hit a good rapport. Steve was his name, and Steve kind of helped me. And I said, well, how do I get into this? And I knew that there was a kid that was graduating, was a senior, and he was going to go on, and they were going to be needing a person. So he said, why don't you apply? So he had me, and this was back UPI, AP, had the teletype machines, and you and I had to change ribbons and get our fingers all black. And these people that are listening, I have no clue of what you're talking about. Yeah. But teletype was your 24-hour news service for radio people, because if there's something that rang out, it would ring a little tone, and you had to change that out, and you would give you your weather, give you your sports scores. It was an automatic. It was internet before internet. I mean, it was live, and so you could get your stuff. So I ripped some of those, did a news story, and the GM just didn't at that time, and that's why I tried to get like a deeper resonant voice. I was in high school. Yeah. He said, well, his voice seems a little high, I said, what are you wanting, Wolfman Jack? I didn't know. And luckily for me, he kind of gave in. He says, well, this is your project, Steve, if you kind of keep them under your wing and do it. So I did that for three years. So I did that, even when I came back after graduation. So then I went to Brown Institute, and then we're getting close to the Lawton story, because Brown Institute, which I think is closed now, I don't think they operate as a school, was in Minneapolis. And I went there because most of the guys that were from broadcasting that were on the local radio station came from that school. And that was about, at that time, when speed limit was 55 miles an hour, is a 6-hour drive. Now it's about 5 hours to get from where I lived to Minneapolis. So I went there for 9 months, even though I was in radio, I had experience. They put my tape out, and my first job offer was from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It's the overnight gig, and they wanted a female, and they said, but we'll take you. And I was kind of like, okay, second string. Okay. But then right before they said a lady came in and they took it. So I didn't get that. So my next offer was from Lawton, Oklahoma. And I remember at the broadcasting school, they had a map of the United States, and I'm from Michigan. Okay. So I'm far north. Oklahoma, all I could imagine was, I didn't think Indians at the first. I thought Dust Bowl with tumbleweeds, because we knew about the Dust Bowl in the first part of the turn of the century of that time. And so I was thinking as barren. And so I remember my gym teacher and head football coach, I was so excited. And I said, man, I got my first job. And he said, where? And I said, Lawton, Oklahoma. And he went, Oklahoma. But I was a young man, just interested to get, I learned by kind of getting behind the scenes to get a part-time job, then to go to schooling to get a full-time job. And I said, I'm only going to be here a year. I'm going to get some experience, and then I'm going to go back up north where I'm very familiar with. And ever since then, I've stayed. I eventually got married, had kids, and the rest is history. But then bouncing around with some radio stations, you kind of asked, and it's kind of like I didn't leave radio. Radio kind of left me in some ways, because they got a buyout with more of the bigger companies. It wasn't mom and pops anymore. And then voice tracking came in available, and they could do a voice from anywhere. I was voice tracking for many, many years until they just pared it down to where they don't need as many. So, and when I left, they still said, well, would you do some part-time work, for sports? And I did that. And then they missed a full-time position, and they said, well, we're going to be looking for a replacement, and would you like to fill in? And I said, well, how long do you think you need me to, cut tracks for you? And he said, about 2-3 months. Well, 6 years later, I'm still doing it. And then they finally phased it out, where the person that was doing afternoons for the local radio station, there was one guy that did the entire market for one, and that makes sense. Business sense. You have one guy who voices it throughout the country, and you don't have, but you lose your local pitch. You lose, you become more of a regionalized PlayStation, basically.
Yeah. And I want to jump in there, Eric, because what you said, and I hope everyone was listening to that, when you and I started, a kid, right? I started working
16
overnight.
years.
Yeah. I was 18, you were 16, right? And by the way, all the guys, I was the first full-time guy at KRLG in like several years that had not come from Brown, by the way. Yeah, because we hired Mike GM really liked the program at Brown, and so he'd always hire guys from Brown. But it's sad. It's sad in a way, and I don't mean to sound like the old guy yelling at the sky, right? Because times change. But back in the early 80s, mid 80s, a kid could go to work at a local station and do all the stuff you talked about. And then now, I've said this before, I can drive from Spokane, where I live, to Seattle, and I hear four classic rock stations on that drive that are the same station, the same announcers, because it's all a network. They're all iHeart stations.
Right.
The only thing that's different are different sweepers on each station.
Yep.
So these small local stations, to your point, have now become just part of a big network. And so kids can't do news, right? Kids can't rip news off the teletype and do the things that we grew up doing. And so that makes me kind of sad, right? Because the nature of radio has changed. Local radio, even in a town the size of Spokane, which is not a small town, not a big city, most of the stations might have a live local morning show, but the rest of the day it's voice tracked. So it's different than it was 30, 40 years ago. And that's kind of sad.
Well, some of the markets are still holding on to a local morning show when they can get it. In this community, everything is piped in except for one. And there is one individual that's looking to retire. And when they do, I think the concept will be they'll pipe that one in too. There are still some small, I'll enjoy it. You'll still go around in some small communities in Oklahoma that are still locally owned, and they have locally everything. And that's refreshing, because there is some of that still, but it's a small remnant. I mean, if you're not owned by a mom and pop, then you're just going to be bought up, and they don't really want those small ones. I remember when Clear Channel came in and they wanted to go, they were a major market. And so they wanted medium market, and either they found out that they couldn't really make that money in medium market, so they sold out, and it became AM, FM, and then Town Square Media came in eventually to buy that. But I remember Clear Channel said, okay, we'll dominate. We had outside venue stuff. We had major markets. Now we want middle market. And then they they unloaded on all their middle market and went just back to major market. I don't even know what they're doing now. But
and here's the thing. And I'm not a smart man, Eric, but here's what I think.
I'm not a smart man.
Yeah, I'm not a smart man. But here's what I think. I think because of, and this is the whole reason for, by the way, let me put in a plug here for the Community Online Radio Network, CORN. Yeah. That's our Facebook group. That's the whole reason I started that group, because I think I am nostalgic for exactly what you're talking about. The local radio stations where you're hear when you said the Daily Show, where it's like a buy and sell show.
Oh, yeah. Right? Telephone time is what they call it.
I mean, that is awesome. That is, and I miss that. I'm nostalgic about that.
Well, because you communicated with people, though. So you connected to your listeners, and your listeners, could, and they chimed up, because it wasn't just buy and sell as a complete program. He'd have little trivia in there, and who could answer the trivia, and people would call up and get engaged in that way. And he'd have fun. I mean, he'd have fun with his listeners. And
it was local. It was local people, right? So I think that's where the big opportunity lies in internet radio now, is local. I'm representing Radio Valley, my station, Western Montana, North Idaho, very rural, never really been serviced by radio stations. So that's where I found a niche. Let's do something local. Let's do something that these folks can't find anywhere else. And so far, knock on wood, it's working out well for me. So I think that's the opportunity that internet radio gives us, is we can kind of get back to some of that local stuff that we had 40 years ago. So,
yeah. And I think if you're willing to, if you have a passion for it and you put in some of the work and, elements and you don't have to be so intimidating, equipment has changed so much. And, the video side that I'm doing with the Oklahoma Sports Network, which is completely foreign to me when I first started, is that, as a radio guy going into, but now the technology is there to kind of help you along. So even with this, I mean, you don't have a, you helped me with the segues and you put in your sweepers. But what I loved about this, and when you hooked me up with it, and I was very excited because when you were doing it, and I said, really? I said, I could do that because
totally
on my iPod, and that's dating me too. Apple wants you to transfer it all on your phone. They don't want you to have an iPod anymore. But my iPod had 1,100 or so songs on it. And it was my personal favorite. So I hate to say that my radio station is my personal jukebox. But that's exactly what it is. I mean, I know every song, and there's a legit reason why it's there. It's mainly 70s and 80s, which you don't really get. You kind of get some of those retro shows on the weekend, but, it's either going to be in the current stuff. But, I mean, we live in the past because we gravitate towards that music that we like. And that's not going to go away. But, one thing I was thinking when you said that you were going to have me on, I said, now every restaurant, every phone, everywhere you go. And I remember when I was a kid, it was my parents' music, 50s, 60s music. And they were playing oldies. And that's what they called it. Yeah. Oldies, but goodies, oldies, 50s, 60s. Well, now it's all 80s, 70s and 80s. And I said, now you're old when they're catering, to restaurants and whether they put the real one or they put it to Muzak, which is, kind of the instrumental version of it. And you go, wow, we're the next generation up, and so I know my sons look at me and I've got two boys, one that loves 80s because he grew up in me in the truck with a cassette deck and he knew all those songs. Yeah. And my other son who's repulsed by it, he can't. And he loves 70s. He loves 70s, but he does not like 80s. And it's their own personal choice, And so we're going to be talking about artists and groups and especially the 80s. And I know you do have a classic guitar rock program that you talk about and a lot of those artists. But my genre of 80s is all one hit wonders. So there's not, hey, they've gone on to do this project. They did nothing. Okay.
That's it. That's all you get.
That's one song. Yeah.
So we see your signage in the background and you mentioned it. So let me ask you about the Oklahoma Sports Network, how you got into that, and just explain to folks what the Oklahoma Sports Network is, because I have to tell you this. I've never told you this, Eric. You thanked me for getting you into this internet radio. I was totally inspired by what you had done with the Oklahoma Sports Network. And in fact, that's one of the things that really got me looking into online radio was here's Eric is leveraging, because Eric has always been a sports guy. That's one thing I've never done in radio, never done sports. Eric's very good at it. I remember, Eric, you would do play-by-play for every sport. You could do it all and sound like you knew what you were talking about. I couldn't do that. But you parlayed that into a what to me looks like a very successful network. Explain to us the model for OSN, because I think there's something we could learn from that also. So tell us about the Oklahoma Sports Network.
Okay, so 10 years ago, we were doing games like we normally do for the radio and radio only. And one of the opponents that we were having to play against at our home stadium, these guys were bringing up cameras and tripods and boxes of stuff, and we had our little radio box and a set of headsets, and I said, what on earth is this? He just said to me, he said, if you're not doing this, you're really missing out. I said, well, I have nothing. Well, they were radio guys too. They were radio guys that were doing streaming. And so he knew, I said, I know nothing of this technology. I don't even know where to start. And he said, and I owe him beyond gratitude. I've tried to take him to dinner, and he said, no, it's okay. I mean, shared knowledge, just like you've shared a great stuff of what you've done, passed it on to me and our friendship. And that's why, in like manner, he said, when the season's over, come see me and I'll tell you how to work it. And we'll get our tech guy and he can kind of show you how it works. And it was a lot easier than what I thought. Now, there was a little bit of a learning curve like there is in anything, but we did local sports and we built it up to 13 different channels that we just basically do the local sports for the different schools from around our area. And we keep growing, and we've done some collegiate stuff. We do we do SNU rugby because some of these schools that are collegiate schools, they have club balls that are not in athletics.
Right.
And so OU is the same way. We do OU lacrosse. I'm going to go. That's why I'm dressed up. I'm going tonight to do an OU lacrosse match. I don't really know much about OU lacrosse as a sport, but we're going to muddle our way through it. But that just keeps adding because we are in a visual world. We have an app. You can download the app. You can watch it for free. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. But the thing is that's the platform, just like this radio thing is. There's a platform you go to be able to listen to it. This is a platform where you can go and see it and watch it on your phone and watch it on your TV. And one little thing that I'll say, technology, how that changes. And I think that's really interesting. 10 years ago, we said the word streaming, and literally people didn't know what that was.
Right.
You had to define what streaming was. Now you say, what? Yeah, 10 years ago. Well, 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, you wouldn't know what an iPhone was. And so you'd go, what? I mean, there's a world before that. So they didn't know what streaming was. Well, what is it? Is it like, you're doing broadcast radio style on the internet where we can listen to it? No, you can watch it. You can watch it. That's streaming. Mm-hmm. And then, no one had a Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, Apple TV. And so literally people said, well, how can I watch it on my TV? Literally 10 years ago. And that's not really that long of a time period, but technology, how it changes so fast. We literally had to tell people, okay, get your laptop out, go to our website, get an HDMI cord, plug it from your computer into your TV, and you can watch us there. Yeah. Well, now he said, do you have any of those devices? Do you have a smartphone? You can just project it up. So you don't have to go educate people.
And now almost everyone has Roku, so they can watch it. And so a little context, Oklahoma, Texas, football is king. I mean, football is a very big deal. And I got to tell you, Eric, during football season, I love watching my Lawton High Wolverines play. The only thing that bums me is you cover the MacArthur game. So if I'm watching Lawton High, I usually don't hear Eric.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I'll watch a MacArthur game just because I can hear Eric. But man, that is really cool. And cool for these high schools. When we were in high school, you could never see your team play on TV and stuff. That's just,
and they live in this world. So when you try to explain a world before them, I'm sounding like my parents or my grandparents back in the good old days, when we talked about teletypes, are you kidding me? That's how you got your news source information. I remember during the Iraq War, and it would go off and there would be something and you could project that, and so that's how we gained our news to relay the news. And that came with sports too, bottom of the sixth, they give you an update of a team and you'd kind of set that on what you wanted. And you say, man, that was all without the internet. And what else could you do?
Yep. And you said something earlier that really resonates with me. And I'm wondering how many of our, folks watching this or that are in the community online radio network are attracted by the same way. You and I are both radio nerds. We love radio. Seriously, format was secondary. Right. I just like when you said when the AM stations powered down at night and you could all of a sudden in Lawton, I would listen to WLS from Chicago, right? At night. And there's just that something romantic about the static and hearing Larry Lujak from Chicago when I was 15 years old.
Right.
I was like hooked. And this is one of the biggest challenges of internet radio. And as soon as I get it figured out, I'll let you know. I'm working on it.
Okay.
And that is being able to broadcast live. It's really hard. So for those of you that maybe aren't into it, most internet stations, you talk about voice tracking. you've got to record everything and it's played in that format. And I got a little mixer that will let me go live. I mean, my dream is to be able to actually do like a live morning show on my little internet station.
Well,
I'm not quite there. I think I can get there.
It shouldn't be. Well, I mean, as technology changes, like when I talk about what's happening with us, when I think there's more demand for it, I think they'll make it easier, user friendly to be able to, like right now, I should be able to flip a switch,
Totally.
Do I want it automated or I want to go live. When I go live, everything halts. That's how that Audio Vault and those other programs that were doing it was like, everything was loaded up and you could push the live automated system. But then when you wanted to go live, you just put it in manual, It would stop, and then you'd flip on your mic. So I know it's got to be there.
And it's there now. There are stations that do it. I'm just struggling to get to that point just for minor technical things like, and I don't want to get into all the details because it makes me mad, but yeah, I know it can happen.
You'll get there.
But that's
tutorials on YouTube. Just go
that's the key
now and just go, hey, whoever's done this, please share this information. And maybe that's what you do. I mean, that's your next step with this, since it's a blueprint. You can kind of do a tutorial. Everybody goes tutorials. I mean, even doctors I know. A foot doctor said, man, there was a latest surgery that he hadn't done yet. And he went on YouTube and watched it. Yeah. He got to see a surgery done right there that he understood. And so, man, YouTube is amazing.
It is amazing. And last week, I went to YouTube just to remind myself how to program my garage door opener. I mean, it's awesome. It's like punch in the number of your model number, and there's a video right there. That's a very good point. And ironically, this is a YouTube channel here.
Right.
We're talking about. So let me ask you this. You start, you kind of get out of full-time radio, still with your feet in the door. You get into OSN, and that's going gangbusters. It's great. It seems like every year you're adding more high schools to the network, which is awesome. What have you done? And this is one of the beauties of internet radio, by the way, is you don't have to sit there all day like if you're actually doing an on-air shift, right? But what are the things you've done as you've set up Heartland Hits Radio? And I will put a link to Heartland Hits and to OSN in the description. Okay. So what are some of the things you've done as you've launched? Maybe some mistakes you've made or some tips that you've garnered in this short amount of time that might be beneficial to anyone watching this?
Well, the only thing is, and you and I are the same in this land, and I have not fixed it yet. We talked about the fade overs, and it's really kind of hard because you got cold ending songs and then you have stuff that fade out. And then with your recording on my devices, and that's the only thing that irritates me. And when I got to go in there, there is about maybe, we'll use an old expression, 2 or 3 seconds of dead air. Now, maybe a new generation could care less because it's the next play track and they're not worried about bumpering that up and overlapping. And I love those kind of things. That's the thing that I'm frustrated with, because I'll get in and my levels are not right with some of my voice, so the music's there. Cause you want to say, it's kind of like the old TV commercials where they would be louder than and you had to turn it down. They'd say, why don't we just make that? And FCC had to come in and make it a law because they were trying to purposely do that to make it stand out that it was commercials. And they said, no, let's just keep it level at our production. So my production level with the voice needs to come up. I need to work on that a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then shoring up some of those songs, because I'm in the car, because I listen to it quite a bit. I mean, because my preference. I told you it's my personal jukebox. So I listen to it and then the song ends and okay, when's it going to fire up?
Come on.
Oh, and then it fires off. So
I have it's funny. One of my little videos on this channel, I called it Radio Engineer-itis. and it is totally what you're talking about. I get so frustrated hearing the levels go down to, where 95% of people don't even notice or care.
You're right. I mean, and that's a personal preference, because maybe someone's watching this and they say, well, that doesn't bother me at all. But for those of us who Well, and it was instilled into us, by our program directors. There was no dead air. I mean, you talked about, there was a guy, and I won't call him out, he's still in the industry, and we named him Dead Air Dave. And the reason being is he got on the phone. That's the other thing is too, local when you were live in a smoke-filled DJ room. We should go back in the yesteryears. And you had to have your own little protective mic shield because it was smoke filled and caffeine stained, from coffee. And I'm not going to be behind that guy's mic. But anyway, you'd have to answer the phone. And of course, there was all kinds of characters that would call you up for a request, but he really liked talking to the ladies. Yeah. And so he really got into that, and you'd come bursting down the hallway because there's dead air for about 3 to 5 seconds.
What are you doing? Oh,
he said, that was back in the day when you had to, okay, class, let's listen to Q Burns. You had to go back. You had to queue up the records. This was records before CDs, before computer. So we had turntables, and you had 2 of them, and you had cart machines for your commercials. And he would be on the phone, and he'd really be in that conversation. And he was so nonchalant, though. I mean, even when you kind of brought it to his attention, okay, yeah, and he just kept back on it.
Yeah. And not to go too far down the rabbit hole here, but stations would have, typically it was an Optimod. It was a compressor, right? Yeah. So that's what made it sound like radio, is that tight, compressed, sparkly signal. And I'm on a quest to recreate that, and I get so frustrated because I can't. So I'm trying to balance that with no one notices, no one cares, right? Don't let it hold you back, right?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of that, though. You have to let go that it's really not a big deal. And why are we making it a big deal? Just because that's what we grew up with. But it's hard. It's hard. I told you, that's what irritates me the most is next song, please. Next song. Let's get on with it. The train's moving. Yeah.
And, something else I was just going to say. Oh, okay. So what have you done, Eric, in terms of, and if you haven't yet, I know you're kind of in that start out phase too, but what have you done as far as reaching out to folks, your own personal marketing efforts for Heartland Hits?
Well, I need to do a much better job than that. I started the Facebook page, and got that and started to engage a little bit. And then, I invited all my friends on Facebook because I've got about 1,000, if you call it that.
Yeah.
Are they really friends?
Yeah.
So that follow me on Facebook. And so I kind of generated a little bit of that, but that's another thing. I mean, if you're going to get involved in this and be on social media, you've got to be current. You got to be involved. You got to take that on too. You just can't be, well, how else are they going to find you? And that's what I learned from OSN is that you got to go and meet people where they are.
Yeah.
And so if you're not an X person, which was formerly Twitter, it doesn't matter because there may be someone that would love to hear from you that is there. So I'm on X, I'm on Instagram. This is on OSN now, not with Heartland Hits Radio yet.
Right.
But on X, on Instagram, on Facebook, but that's an undertaking to keep it fresh. And I know you do a great job with that, and you interact with people, and you have shirts that you can give away and things like that. That's nice, and a connection back to it. So I have not, outside of just starting the Facebook page, but I'll get more into that as we grow.
One thing that I always thought would be a major advantage for you, Eric, is number one, your broadcasting experience, but you've been in that community for 40 years. You know, lots of people, your own personal network is very large. Yeah. So that could definitely be leveraged.
Well, and the only thing I have not done, and I toyed with it a little bit, how much do I cross branch over through OSN to market Heartland Hits Radio? Yeah. I've not done that yet. Yeah. I've not really crossed those lines. I mean, this is this, but you can cross promote, and I would have no problems with, well, is the same way. Do you put on, hey, let's, check out the Oklahoma Sports Network on Heartland Hits Radio. And I
would totally be doing that. Yeah, I would totally. And I could see, Eric, you voicing a commercial that runs during OSN broadcasts. Hey, check out Heartland Hits Radio.
Right. That's true.
That
you crawl before you walk, before you run. And I think those are the steps. Yes.
Yeah. And I just want to throw this out. I say this all the time for anyone thinking about starting their radio station. because here's what I run into all the time is people want everything to be perfect before they flip the switch. And I'm like, don't do it. Just start it. Just jump. And I really believe you just jump in head first, and it's an iterative process. It will get better as you go along. Radio Valley's better now than when I started it a year and a half ago. Right. And I think that's okay. I would just say, don't.
And if you have a network like, we're friends and you've helped me and I'm still waiting to pay you back, you say, hey, could you do some voice work for me? And I said, yeah, I can certainly give you a trade-off to kind of give you something else there. And so you kind of maybe, and this is a good place that you network. And I noticed that with streaming too. I mean, the people that I got a guy that I know in Alabama. I got a guy that I know in Texas. We're far from each other, but we're doing the same thing. And so I get ideas from them and they help me. And they start a little group that came in and just kind of exchange. Facebook's got that too,
and that's, to be honest, Eric, that's why I started this little corn group. And it is corny. Yeah. Yes, I know. But that's why I started the whole group. And we've only got like 17 or 18 people. But that's really, I wanted to have a forum for folks that are doing what we're doing. And if that means trading out voiceover work for each other, that's great. Whatever it is, you mentioned your personal jukebox, and that's maybe you shouldn't watch some of my videos because I really bust on people's personal jukeboxes only for this reason.
Right.
And I don't mean to brag, but I have an internet radio station that is profitable. And
yes.
as I talk to people, the vast majority of internet stations don't make any money.
Right.
And I'm convinced that the reason that is 90% of stations make their focal point the music. And don't get me wrong, I love music. That's why I started my classic guitar rock channel. The focus was music. But what I'm finding is, don't take this wrong, Eric.
No, I won't.
Why would I listen to your personal jukebox when I have my own on Spotify? And what I always say is the magic happens between the songs, right?
Good point.
So I've got to give people something they can't get from their playlist. For me, it's been this hyper localizing, right? I'm focusing on a very rural area, and I think that's why it's worked. The music could be anything. I could be playing oldies, I could be playing all country, I do a middle of the road 60s, 70s, 80s with like 2 country songs an hour. That's my music mix.
Well, I got satellite does some, when you say, I could go here to this service, but usually it'll be 80s on 8 or 70s,
True.
The mixture. So it's a little bit of my methodology is I want this because I can't really get it anywhere.
And that's
this kind of format. And I've had friends that said, you know what? I mean, because I can't wait to go back, on my vacation in June, and we're out on a little flat boat. I mean, the
houseboat,
it's my dad calls it a flat bottom scow. It is a a pontoon boat.
Pontoon boat. Yeah. Okay.
We have a pontoon boat. You get about 10 or 12 people on there, and then I can crank because I got a nice little speaker, and I can plug in my Bluetooth to it. And I said, I can't wait just so I can have that on all the time, because local isn't going to give you that. And, it's hard to connect in those services unless it's on your phone. But anyway, I get what you're saying, and I think it's important. And I think the local is always going to win, because that's what they're not doing right now.
Yeah. Any tips or last bits of advice you might have for someone, particularly, Eric? I'm really putting you on the spot here. Maybe for someone that's not from a radio background, but this is something they've always thought about doing. Any tips or thoughts you might have for folks that are thinking about starting an internet radio station?
I think when it comes to personality, if you want to call it that, is just be yourself. I think that's really won over. Back in the day, we always had to say, "Oh, the big voices, the Wolfman Jacks, the personality," but they were a personality, And in fact, a lot of those guys didn't even use their real names.
Mm-mm.
I mean, they didn't want to be noticed, as that's my day job. But I think that was the first thing: is be true to yourself of who you are, and then what you like, because you gotta like what you do. And if you don't like what you do, then it's a job. And you, like you said, you do this for fun.
Yeah.
I do this for fun. So pick something that you like, gravitate to it, whether it be country or a different format. Or I talked about, do I do sports on here? Do I not? How much local do you make it? And you're right, because if you're trying to go broad nationally, you're competing nationally. So you gotta keep it local. I mean, newspapers are fading away because they're not local. What are they doing? They're bringing in articles that are from all over the part of the country with opinions, and they load it up with all the stuff because they don't have any local TV stations are getting to be like that. They get a feed of stuff that they can, but you can get that anywhere.
Yeah.
You miss out on the local, you're missing out. I think.
And then, not to brag, but Eric and I both worked, well, Eric for years and years. Can you imagine working at a radio station in Tornado Alley during tornado season?
We had one last night.
Oh, did you really?
Unfortunately, it got a mother and a daughter, and they were caught. It was a nighttime tornado came across. It's very early. That's usually kind of an April, May thing.
Yeah.
Not first part of March thing. And we got some more severe weather tonight. But I mean, people. And there are guys that have done that. They've done look at how many weather chasers are on YouTube that just chase this stuff. And people, now they're not just chasing it. They're doing like what you're doing, local radio. They're doing local meteorology weather stuff where you're not having to go to the local station because they got the equipment and they're just going live. And thanks to YouTube, again, people can connect to it.
And so I'm just thinking out loud when I say this, and I'm about to wrap this. I could literally, Eric, I could talk about this stuff for hours. Eric and I both like nerding out on this stuff, but I really see, you mentioned newspaper, local radio. I really see an opportunity if folks can do it right for online radio. I really do. I really see a big
technology's there. Well, the same thing for us. When OSN, only the big boys could do it because you had to have hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment, and no one had that budget.
Yeah.
Well, now everybody's got that budget. Everybody can go live and just a computer and a simple camera. And so the technology has changed. So it's changed the playing field for sure.
For sure. It's awesome. Eric, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. I think what you've talked about will be really
hopefully
helpful.
It benefits somebody. And, if we can answer any questions, Jeremy is a good point man to kind of point you in the right direction. So that'll be a good.
And as I mentioned, I will put links to Heartland Hits, your radio station, and the Oklahoma Sports Network. And one last plug to join the Community Online Radio Network. Just find us on Facebook. We'd love to have you there. Eric, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
You too.
And we'll see you. Bye-bye.